All right, let's jump right in. There is a quiet but massive revolution happening inside one of the world's oldest religions. We're talking about a profound change, a complete transformation of a tradition that's been around for 2,500 years, and it's happening right under our noses, mostly here in the West.
And don't just take my word for it. Sociologist James William Coleman puts it this way: Buddhism is going through what may be the most sweeping change in its long history. And you want to know the wildest part? It's passing unnoticed by most of the world.
So using Coleman's book, The New Buddhism, as our guide, we're going to unpack that very idea. We see this ancient religion being reborn in a new place, a new time. But the real question is, what is it actually becoming?
To even begin to answer that, we've got to first understand what makes this new Buddhism so radically different from everything that came before it.
So picture this. It's 4:45 in the morning at a Zen retreat. But look at the people gathering. It's not a bunch of monks in ancient robes. It's a guy with a ponytail, a woman in a fancy jogging suit, a kid with punk rock hair. You know, they're regular people, but they're here for a very old reason. They're seeking enlightenment.
And this scene really gets to the heart of what Coleman calls the new Buddhism. See, that path to liberation, enlightenment, the whole big goal, that used to be the exclusive full-time job of monks and nuns in Asia. But now, it's being offered to basically any Westerner who's interested. That solid line that used to separate the religious professionals from everybody else, it's getting really blurry.
So let's really dig into that. Let's put the old path and these new practitioners side by side, because when you see the contrast, you really start to get just how big of a revolution this is.
Okay, so traditionally, that divide was like a brick wall. You had monks and nuns whose whole life was about attaining enlightenment. And then you had the lay people who supported them, mostly hoping to get some good karma for a better next life. But now, that wall is just gone. A software engineer, a teacher, a stay-at-home dad, they can be just as serious about the quest for liberation as someone living in a monastery. And then there's the role of women, which has done a complete 180. Historically, Asian Buddhism was very much a man's world. Women were often seen as subordinate, and in some traditions, it was even debated whether a woman could become fully enlightened. But in the West, shaped by decades of feminism, there's this huge push for equality. In fact, women now often outnumber men at these centers. They practice as total equals, and this is huge. They're becoming the teachers and leaders. And what about the teacher, the guru, the roshi? In Asia, their authority was often seen as absolute. They were held in this incredibly high, almost sacred regard. But here in the West, that authority is much more provisional. It's earned, not just given. Thanks to our democratic values, teachers can be questioned, they can be challenged, and their power is really kept in check by the community itself.
Another huge feature of this new Buddhism is just how eclectic it is. You know, in Asia, different Buddhist schools mostly kept to their own lane. But the funny thing is, the West has become this giant melting pot for all of them. It's totally normal to find teachers quoting from Zen masters, Tibetan lamas, and maybe even a Christian mystic or a modern psychologist all in the same talk.
So, what does this all look like when you walk into a center? Well, it's not just one single thing. You can think of it as three main streams, or maybe flavors, that have really taken root over here.
This chart breaks it down perfectly. First, you've got Zen from Japan. Its aesthetic is all about elegant simplicity. Think black robes, quiet meditation halls. It really appealed to intellectuals and the beat poets back in the day. Then you have Tibetan Buddhism. This came over with the Tibetan diaspora, and it's like a riot of bright colors. It's passionate, full of exotic imagery, and led by huge personalities like the Dalai Lama. And finally, there's Vipassana. Now, its roots are the most ancient, but it's actually the newest to the West, and it feels much more secular, almost like a form of psychological self-help, because it was brought back by Westerners and has the least amount of cultural baggage.
Okay, so all of this leads us to the biggest question of all. Why? Why is this happening? Why is this ancient tradition in this new package so incredibly appealing to modern Western people? What itch is it scratching?
Well, the first clues start to appear when you look at who is drawn to these centers. The demographics are pretty striking. The members are overwhelmingly white, upper middle class, and their level of education is, and I'm quoting here, right off the charts. They're also much more likely to be politically liberal than the average American.
And this isn't just some tiny niche hobby. The growth has been absolutely explosive. Check out this number, 1,062. That's how many of these meditation centers existed in North America back in 1997. The really stunning part, that's more than double the number that existed just 10 years before.
So now our question gets a lot more specific. Why this group? Why these wealthy, liberal, highly educated people? And why now? What is it about our specific moment in history that makes this ancient philosophy so compelling?
Coleman believes the answer lies in something he calls the project of self-construction. Basically, it's the uniquely modern and kind of exhausting struggle to figure out who you are. We are just bombarded 24/7 by a storm of conflicting messages about who we should be, what we should want, how we should look. It's a lot.
Let's just boil it down. In the past, your identity was pretty much given to you. You were born into a family, a village, a religion, and that told you who you were. But today, it's a DIY project. You have to build your own identity from scratch, and that creates this deep, constant, low-level anxiety for a lot of people.
And this is where Buddhism offers a truly radical solution. It doesn't give you a better instruction manual for building a self, it tells you to throw the whole project out the window. Its core teaching is that this idea of a fixed, separate self that you're trying so hard to build, it's an illusion. And for someone who is just exhausted by that project of self-construction, that idea isn't depressing. It is an incredible relief.
So, we're left with this one last huge question to think about. It's pretty clear that this ancient tradition has found incredibly fertile ground in the anxieties of our modern world. But as Buddhism adapts to fit us, is it changing us, or are we changing it? That right there is the central question, and it's definitely something worth chewing on.